Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Really excited to have yet another installment of our LinkedIn audio series around generative AI and automation. This week, I'm joined by two special guests, one of whom is my good friend, not only guest, but my good friends, one of which is Mr. Mark Goodair. Mark, how are you, sir?
I'm doing awesome and extremely happy to be part of this conversation today with such a hot topic and a great panel as well.
And Mark, we've been working together on a few different things. Tell the audience a little bit about your role at Automation Anywhere and some of the stuff that you've been doing with automation and generative AI.
Absolutely. So I'm director of automation and business transformation. And so one of the key things I'm involved in is leading our own center of excellence for our automation program. Some folks that have signed in today might be aware of that, but we have our own up and running, thriving, growing, highly skilled automation program within the company, which is very, very exciting. And so like the rest of the world, we're also excited about the combination of automation plus generative AI and the possibilities that can be unlocked with it. So we'll be talking about lots of that on this conversation, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think this installment is particularly exciting because we've had the previous installments and we've talked about practical use cases, but a lot of the conversation is still at a high level. A lot of conversation in the industry, even as people are figuring out what to do. But in this case, there's actually stuff that we're building, that you and the team are building. And without further ado, I want to introduce our very special guest, Mr. Sumit Johar, the CIO here at Automation Anywhere. Sumit, how are you, sir? And thank you for joining.
I'm doing great, Grabe, and thank you for inviting me. Good morning to you, good morning to Mark, and good morning to our audience today. Well, generative AI is the talk of the town these days, so if you're not talking about it, what are we really doing? For those of you who don't know about me, I'm CIO at Automation Anywhere. Mark is part of my organization, and there's a lot of discussion. There's a lot of excitement about how we can leverage generative AI, as part of our automation program internally, as Mark was explaining. And I'm looking forward to the conversation about that today.
That's going to be great. Sumit, one of the things that caught my eye, obviously, a timely blog post from you where you posted the top 7 sort of use cases, and I know that there's plenty more, but you posted a blog recently listing out some of the top use cases from the lens of the CIO, which is really the topic today. But more generally, from your perspective, what sort of gets you excited around this combination of specifically generative AI and automation? What's the big ideas and what gets you fired up?
Well, Gabe, I remember writing this blog, I think maybe a month back or so. You're just scratching the surface when it comes to, learning about generative AI, its potential. And I got to tell you, since then, the list of 7 has probably turned into a list of 77, and the list keeps going up and up. But really, from my side, we've always been looking at leveraging AI, and generative AI is just one part of it. But we as automation evangelists within my org have always been looking at the concept of intelligent automation in general. I mean, we've been preaching the same to our customers, and we were always very clear that if you could combine the intelligence of AI with the ability of automation technologies to take action, you could do wonders. This is like a marriage made in heaven. But the problem is building AI models within an enterprise were super expensive and time consuming. You needed large data sets. You needed to hire ML experts and constantly improve your models. And it was just, very expensive and very complex infrastructure and team that you had to invest in. Wasn't really easy for everybody to do that. But for the first time, it feels like AI has been made available as a service that can be consumed by not only enterprises, but also individuals. So for me, that's the most exciting part. And the other side of this is, and if you just look at it from, from people who spent time building automation, from their point of view, one of the biggest challenge in building automation has been how do you help your end users engage with technology or engage with automation? Because people speak in a natural language, natural way, and that doesn't always make it easy for automation developers to be able to make automation be accessible to your end users. But with generative AI, it's finally, it seems like you found a way, find the intent in that human and machine interaction. To me, that's the key part. It makes it super easy to automate tasks because the hardest parts were finding the intent. That's what I'm super excited about, and I'll let Mark also explain because he's the one who's actually doing it.
I think I'll jump in. I think you've struck something that I think is the key. When I look at generative AI and sort of the UI side of it and that simplicity to it, it's, we've talked about the democratization of automation with citizen developers and with the Automation Success Platform and Automation 360, the drag and drop, and somebody like me can even build automations, which is a miracle unto itself because I can barely turn my phone on. But that said, the access now to those AI models is so simple. And I thought it was kind of genius, honestly, with ChatGPT, just the interface, because like I showed it to my mom, for instance, and she's like, "Oh, look how cute and easy that is. Like it types out the words and look how fast." Just that experience makes it feel sort of more welcoming, less complex, right? Let alone the outputs and all that. And clearly, I'm talking about ChatGPT, which is sort of a simple version. But once you get into the back end, you're doing GPT, 3.5 or 4 or whatever. There's clearly much more complex and robust applications, right? But I just feel like that simplicity, that sort of, as you mentioned, that democratization of AI is really helps just turbocharge this whole conversation.
Totally agree with that. You hit the nail when you say, I almost felt like you stole my words when you said democratization of technology. In the past, when we had these conversations, Gabe, you would remember, we talking about democratization, and you know h- the true value of any technology, I strongly feel, can only be achieved through democratization. And when I say democratization, it doesn't mean how accessible it is to technology people. It just means any technology that is meant for technologies is not going to be able to go too far. In this case, I think what's happening is technology has become so easily accessible to end users, and that's what is now causing this disruption that we're all dealing with. So yes, it's all about democratization of AI finally.
And I think too, like, so, many of us are at various levels, we're still sort of dabbling with it, right? So very simple prompts, and then some of us are doing more complex prompts. But again, I think the thing that's interesting is because it is a simple interaction with the technology, it allows for that ability to explore, right? So then you get into use cases and you get into like, some simple ideas and some more, like I said, there's definitely complex things we probably haven't thought about yet. But I think you brought up, and I've heard it in previous conversations, I thought it was interesting. I think it was Ted Shelton from Bain, who mentioned, um, the AI sort of being the brain and then automation being sort of the arms and legs, if you will, right? Because just getting a response back isn't quite enough, right? You need more than that to an enterprise scenario, for instance.
That's
100%.
that, that's why I say, Gabe, these two technologies are like marriage made in heaven. Uh, you know, automation, in my past life, I've been doing automation for a long time, and I used to get this feedback constantly that you got to think about all the possible rules that you have to build up front, and no matter how many rules you build, you will find that at some time, while end users start using it, you will come across something that you just did not think about, and now you got to build more rules. It's just like an endless cycle of thinking about all the possible rule sets that automation was built on. And you had to build these rules because there was no easy way to understand the intent of what the user is trying to do. And for me, with this huge significant power of the large data sets the generative AI is using, it just makes it super easy for me to not think about every single rule in advance and just explain the intent and then take an action. Automation technologies are really good at taking action, and AI is really good at finding the intent. If you put them together, simplify automation in general.
Absolutely. Another way to think about this that I think is powerful is, when I think about generative AI, I think of it as an accelerator. In other words, these technologies are helping us to iterate faster on anything that involves content. So, for example, on the solutioning side, how can we iterate faster when I need to explore different technical solutions? For example, is this automation going to work better with Python code? Well, generative AI can pretty much hand me the code and we can test it out. So I can iterate from a solutioning standpoint much quicker. And also all the content that we're involved in our different business processes, whether that's email communications or publications about what the automation program is doing, or documentation describing our automations, all that iterative process, it just got accelerated thanks to this technology. So that's another way I think we can think of it is it helps us kind of get to the right answer or the right content faster and iterate quicker.
I think that's interesting too, by the way, because everyone's like, myself included, we're looking at all the glorious and big ideas and moonshots and all those super cool things you could do. But even from a simple documentation process and helping to expedite that saves a ton of time, right? Like there's so many other spots along the way that can have significant impact. And we'll talk a little bit about that because you and I worked on something together as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Sumit and I are actively involved in lots of iterations when we publicize information about what's happening in the automation program. That whole piece about promoting what we're doing within automation is so important, and we do spend a lot of time, refining it to make sure we get the right messaging across. And again, this technology can help us accelerate that. It kind of reminds me of when we all first got introduced to automation, we could never look at a business process the same way. Again, it kind of wrecked us. When we look at a business process, we immediately started thinking, what can we automate? This is the same thing again. It feels like every time we see a business process, now we're saying, what's the content? Does this process create content? Does it modify it? Do we need to understand the content? And if the answer is yes to any of those, which most of the time it is, then generative AI can help us improve that process.
So talking about the content, let's maybe I can throw an example here because you wanted to talk about use cases, Gabe. So the first use case that everybody realized that this technology is really, really good at reading the content, understanding the content, and summarizing for you. The technology is also very good at actually writing and creating the content for you, right? So the one that we started with was with our legal and contract operations team. I know that most lawyers in every legal team, they spend a lot of time reviewing and redlining documents, trying to see, is there a hidden clause in the contract that might become a problem in future? No matter which side of signing the contract you are you a customer, you're a supplier, whatever your role is. But, reviewing the contracts and redlining them is a huge part of everyday's job in a contract operations legal team, right? And in our test, we find out that ChatGPT came pretty close to what a human can do in terms of a review. And imagine how much time our lawyers can save for themselves if they did not have to read hundreds of pages of documents every single day.
Absolutely.
So it's not like there weren't any tools to achieve that. There were tools in the past, but they were not as effective as ChatGPT or other tools are able to do now. So I'm looking huge potential on that side and saving tens of hours for our legal and contract operations teams.
Yeah, those kinds of applications, again, don't sound like the sexiest things in the world potentially, but from the view of the enterprise and the individuals involved, right, and saving them that time, massive savings. And this marriage, as you mentioned, this marriage of intelligent automation and and in AI to be able to do those things. This is the mission, right? Empower the humans so they can do the things that are important. When you talk about reviewing documents, whether they're legal, medical, or otherwise, how much trust can we put into the output from the generative AI tool, do you think?
Well, this is where the checks and balances come in the picture, right? Now, anytime it actually reminds me of the time when iPhones were introduced. iPhones were introduced, I think, in 2006, and every single person that I know bought one and brought to the company, brought to the organization. We were all scratching our heads. How do I protect my company data sitting in these phones? Nobody thought about it, but we knew that this technology is going to disrupt our corporations, how we do our work at office, and people start using mobile phones for work, right? And it took a few years for everybody to figure out, you know we got to find some ways to protect our data on these mobile phones, because everybody's using mobile phones. We got the same situation here. We got a technology that has a lot of potential. We're all trying to figure out, uh, can we completely rely on that? Is it really accurate? Are there risks around, this using this technology? And and the fact is that there are. To your question about, can you really rely on the outcome of a review by generative AI for a contract, my answer would be no. You cannot rely on that 100%. What I would say is that you can leverage generative AI to do all the grunt work, and then I will add a human in the end in the loop and say, let some human actually review whatever it found for you, and whatever it is recommending before you take an action. Let's put a human in the loop. But you're still going to save 80 to 90% of your time in the entire process,
Hmm.
where you're letting AI do all the research and analysis for you, and you're only taking that final last step of a human reviewing it, and then automation can take over, take the action, right? So I'll be careful, not 100% relying on it completely, but I will also be excited about at least passing on some of my work to generative AI, which can still save me a lot of time.
Absolutely. And I mean, Gabe, and submitted, it's funny, the other way of looking at that is, can I rely 100% on a human to do that work as well, right? So
That's a great call.
right? Humans get tired, and if you give me a 100-page contract, I'll do my best. But by page 97, if there's an important line, I might miss it. So I like the way Sumit describes that. Taking the grunt work out, it's phenomenal for that purpose and can save lots of time. It's not necessarily enough. It's again an example of humans and technology working together to solve the problem.
I think it's basically, we're not looking at full autonomy, right? What we're talking about is, as you said, offload those things, still have the human in the loop. And again, we'll get to some of these use cases that we already haven't employed, but with something like the automation copilot, which I'm using with the automation mark that you built for us and our localization team, that is that human in the loop. So we can do sort of the fact checking and make sure it's the result we wanted, right? It makes it super easy. Again, I'm a simpleton and a non-technologist, and I can take advantage of automation and AI. So it's exciting.
And that one, Gabe, if we could just talk about it briefly, that one's a perfect example of what Sumit was just talking about. If we could just talk briefly about it. Essentially, what we're doing there is using our automation plus generative AI to help with localization of video captioning. So we've got lots of videos, things like product videos that are in English. We'd like to provide caption files that are available on YouTube in different languages, so that other folks that don't understand English can also enjoy those videos. That's a perfect example of what Sumit was talking about. We're using generative AI to help us with things like translation and converting to YouTube's proprietary format. But per the process we designed with you, Gabe, there's always a human in the loop, and they can provide that kind of 5% editing to make sure that we get the translation and the tone of the language right in that target language. It's a perfect example of what Sumit was talking about.
Yeah, and I think again, it's near and dear to my heart because the mission for Automation Anywhere is to empower anyone anywhere, and to be able to localize training and support and all the different sort of content that we have quickly, efficiently, where traditionally it takes a long time to just localize a video and do captioning or what have you. It starts to add up with the amount of content we have, right? But I think at the end of the day, doing this with that human in mind, ultimately, that's what gets me sort of really excited. Hey guys, I want to take a quick pause because we have a couple folks that want to ask some questions. So Simon, our producer, Simon, can we bring in one of our guests to ask a question? Ankit, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Doing well, thank you. Thanks for joining the show. And what questions do you have for Sumit and Mark?
So I was hearing Sumit and Mark, and they were talking about automating 80% of the tasks, and they took a use case of the law. I think the law, um, and doing the last mile work by the human. And I've been researching on this tech for the last 10 days a little deeply, but with the talk of GPT-5 and achieving AGI, how long do you foresee as tech leaders AI doing 100% of the task better than humans and no need of a human? This is obviously the question in mind, probably for everyone, but just inquisitive and a hypothetical question, and want to hear a CIO of a firm like Automation Anywhere and his thoughts. Thanks.
Great question, Ankit. I wish I had a perfect answer for you. I know a lot of people are talking about AGI, general intelligence, and how far we are from that. And I don't think anybody will be able to give you a perfect timeline about how far we are. My own feeling is that when it comes to AI in general, we're scratching the surface right now, even with the ability that generative AI is providing us. I think we're able to solve one part of the problem when it comes to achieving human intelligence. But that is just one part of the problem. Being able to, take being able to accept, a form of unstructured data, and then being able to understand the intent out of it, align that with the large data sets, publicly available data that these services have, and then generating an outcome that based on the intelligence it already has, and then and sharing that outcome with you in a form that humans can understand. That is only one part of the puzzle, I think, that we have solved with large data language models. But I think when it comes to human intelligence, there is much more than that is still being discovered. A lot of AI companies are trying to figure out um, how do you come up with creative ideas for which you have absolutely no existing knowledge or no existing data set available to support that. And I think that that work will continue. I don't know whether it's gonna take 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I don't know. But as far as I can see right now, near future, there is a huge potential that's available in front of us for humans to offload a lot of work to AI and continue to focus on more and more on tasks that are 100% creative, and only humans can do that. I think it's going to take a while before we get to real AGI, but I don't think anybody can say how far we are from that.
I would offer that, Ankit, it depends on which subreddit you read. I'm joking.
Yes.
We have another question in the audience. Let's see, is Murali, Simon, can you bring Murali in? All right, there he is. Welcome to the show,
Hi.
Murali. Hi.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a question with regard to whatever everybody is doing these days in AI, generative AI, chat GPT, and stuff like that. We've known that, we've gone through 4 industrial revolutions, including data, which we are going through right now, and probably AI will be the 5th industrial revolution, right? So we have learned enough and more lessons from all the 4 revolutions that we had. Some of it is well documented, and some of it is not, and some of it is forgotten, right? How are we going to ensure that there is human empathy, and not to mention that there is a climate change impact as well, in whatever we do in the next decade using this AI and using this chat GPT and probably, the cousins of chat GPT and stuff like that? That's my question.
Great question. Gabe, do you want me to take it up?
That's a really good question. I think it's really interesting, especially I know there's a lot of talk internally, externally around the ethics, the empathy angle. I think when we, like, for instance, we're talking about some of the use cases, right? And we're talking about some of the practical. And Mark, even when you talk about the development of these use cases that you guys are working on, it's more than just the process, right? There's additional thinking that needs to go into sort of the effect of the output, whether that is, for instance, we have a use case in healthcare. I was just talking about this, where a doctor could create patient instructions. So when you finish your visit, they give you a set of instructions. Here's what you need to do. You need to follow up with this specialist. You need to do X, Y, and Z. It could be 20 pages long, depending on your case. But what if you could use ChatGPT to sort of normalize the language, put it at a 8th grade reading level for the patient, or put it in their language? And so you have those other contextual things, I think, that are really interesting to think about. For the concept of climate change and these things, I think that's a whole nother set of use cases, set of considerations, and I think there's a ton of potential there. And I think this kind of goes back to, in my mind at least, right now, one of the use cases that you mentioned, Sumit, around data and data cleansing and being able to process a ton of data quickly to create, models and decision making. And whether that's for a financial team in an enterprise operation, whether it's for your office of the CIO to make good decisions, you need good data to make good decisions, right? And I think that same line of thinking can be applied to things like climate change or other social issues, right? Because there's a ton of data out there, but what I'm hearing commonly when I talk to various customers and thought leaders and prospects, et cetera, yourself, is this idea of, we have mountains and mountains and mountains of data, and they all live in different places. How do you take all of that and get a sense for what really matters, right? Finding the signal in the noise, if you will. But as I mentioned, Sumit, you talked a little bit about data cleansing in the blog as one of the use cases you're excited about. You want to dive into that a little bit, and what gets you excited there, and what are you thinking?
Yeah, let me answer that. But before that, let me just quickly, give my views about the question that was asked. I think that's directly pointing to the lack of governance that we're all experiencing right now. We have a brand new technology that has huge potential, that can be leveraged for good reasons, and that can be used for bad things, for fraud and for illegal activity, things like that. And I think on one hand it's an opportunity, on the other hand it's a risk, and that's why a lot of people are asking questions about ethics, empathy, governance, things like that. And my own feeling is that disruption with the technology happens first and regulations come much later. There is always going to be a time difference of, I don't know how long, whether it's a year, 2 year, or how long, but there's going to be this time period where people and organizations will have to self-govern in terms of how they are leveraging the technology, like generative AI. They will have to come up with their own policies to make sure that the technology is not being used in ways that it creates more problems than solves more problems. And then at some stage, I expect the government regulations to kick in, which standardize and provide consistent guidelines to all organizations about how are we going to go about using this technology. That's not going to happen anytime soon. So expect some disruption, expect some confusion, need for self-governance, and then the actual regulations and governance probably will follow. That's my take on this. Coming back to Gabe, your question about data. I've been in the industry for almost 24, 25 years, and I haven't come across a single business operations team, whether it is sales, marketing, or what, any other organization, finance operations for that matter, any team that hasn't complained to me about the quality of the data. And I always used to wonder, what's so special about this problem that data, we know the data is bad, we know the data is erroneous, we know the data is not complete. Why is it so hard to solve these problems, especially when there seem to be so many tools already available in this area, but still, this has always been a problem. So I asked my team to run some tests to see, is this an opportunity, is this an area where generative AI can help? Now, I can't claim to say that we have solved all of our problems with generative AI when it comes to data cleansing, but we absolutely saw some initial success in our tests. Generative AI was able to compare similar looking records and mark them as duplicates. It was able to capture, publicly available data, and was able to fill the data gaps that we had internally in our systems. So I'm really excited about the opportunity based on the results that I've seen so far. I don't know whether it's going to solve all of our problems or not, but I do know that this is an area where it's ripe for the use of generative AI.
And Sumit, I think that's been really an interesting exercise, and it's back to this same theme of this perfect marriage between automation and generative AI. If we're going to ask generative AI to help us fill those gaps in the data, enrich the data, and things like that, that's wonderful. Are we immediately going to update our business systems with whatever generative AI came up with? Maybe we want a human to take a look at it. And again, an automation platform. Like the automation success platform is perfect for facilitating that kind of process where somebody does a review before the business systems get updated.
Right.
And I think too, just going back to the empathy side of it, we talk about, we've all seen in the news that prompt engineering is a new skill, and they're paying top dollar for prompt engineers. Actually, I'm fascinated by the concept. Right, ask the right question, get the right answer. Basically, right. From my grandpa used to say, but I think that empathy lens again is a skill set as you're looking at automation and building out solutions, that's a consideration. So you're not just looking at a process sort of end to end, right? You're sort of widening the scope of how you build these solutions. That's my take. Hey, real quick, guys, we've got a bunch of people asking to that want to join and ask their questions. So this is great, and I encourage you all to raise your hand. So let's grab Vinay. Vinay, are you there?
Yes.
Hi, Vinay.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Welcome.
Awesome. First of all, thank you very much for this. This is very informative and helpful. One of my question here is generative AI. I want to understand a bit more on the security side of it, compliance, security side of it. I understand that if you take ChatGPT, OpenAI, although there were initial struggles on the security, they are trying to close the gap and make sure security is tightened. But I just want to hear about security compliance in the near future, as this is open to everyone.
Sure. Okay, I'll try to provide my perspective, and I'll let Mark chime in if he wants to add anything. But there are key considerations when it comes to start using generative AI, ChatGPT, and similar technologies within your enterprise. And I would strongly advise everyone to be very, very careful with the risks, with the limitations, so that you're using it in the right way, in a responsible way. You can't not use it. It's an opportunity. So I absolutely recommend that you should ride the wave and leverage it, but leverage it, use it in a responsible way. So what are those risks? You talked about data security. It's very valid concern. When we started using it internally for our purposes, we noticed that just looking at the privacy terms of ChatGPT, there were concerns because apparently whatever data you share with the service while asking questions, that data can be used for training internally and becomes part of their data sets. Even though the data doesn't automatically become available for public use, there is always a chance that data can be exposed or breached, because now it is part of another company's data sets, basically, right? So that risk is there. I know OpenAI has been improving their privacy policies and giving many different ways to alleviate these concerns. So let's quickly talk about them. One is, if you access these services like ChatGPT services through APIs, I think you can get away from them using your data. There are some ways to achieve that. You can also opt out of saying that, hey, I don't want you to be using my data when I access your services. There are ways to do that. But I think you need to go, if I were a CIO trying to roll it out, let's say within my organization, I'll go a couple of steps further. If you are thinking about using generative AI with sensitive data that you don't want to fall in the wrong hands, I would strongly advise looking at options where you can create a private instance of these services. I know OpenAI has exposed these services, through Microsoft Azure, environment, and it allows you to put all the right enterprise controls, whether it's authentication, data encryption, and privacy in general. There are ways to get around that. The challenge is it's all new, everybody's learning, but my advice would be, if you are taking baby step, and if this is the first time you're using the service, I would say try to use public data initially, and as you graduate towards using sensitive data, try to use an internal instance of these services with the means that I just explained. Those are some steps that you may want to consider. I would also strongly recommend investing time and energy in laying out clear policies and guidelines for your employees. Do not assume that your employees understand what is the right use of the technology. So we are doing the same. We're publishing new guidelines. We're revising them as and when we get a chance. This technology is evolving so fast that you have to pretty much do it on an ongoing basis. So I don't know if this answers your question, but these are a couple of things I would definitely suggest.
And I think Sumit too, with the recent announcements from Google Cloud and their model farms in different solutions in the Gen App Builder and their Vertex AI release, which we're a strategic partner with them in building out those sort of private instances, if you will. I think
Right.
they're these companies that are creating the generative AI models or platforms are like Google Cloud, are thinking specifically about that enterprise application where you can use your own data, right, and keep it private effectively, right?
Yep. But these are all the right questions, and I'm glad that you're asking these questions. You should be asking these questions internally also before you jump the gun and do something that just that creates more problems. Use the opportunity. There is a huge opportunity. Don't miss out on this, but do it in the right way. There are ways to get around all these risks.
We have another audience member that wants to ask a question. Is it Jagar? Jagar, are you there?
Probably Jigar.
Jagar.
Yes, I'm there.
Thanks for joining.
Yeah. Hi, my question is, in last 5 years, right, we are actually developing lots of scenario or use case based AI ML models, right, to provide a solution using this AI technologies. But what I am, so my question is, if I see many of these use cases are being resolved through this generative AI, all right. So in next 3 to 5 years, can we assume that we may not have to develop these custom AI ML based models, which requires lots of training data and lots of uh, model training, and then we reach to the stage. But this generative AI will give us the s- results for them, and we may not require those use cases to be developed in next 3 to 5 years, right? So
Okay, so I get your question. I think what you're trying to understand, hey, all the investment we made over time and all this, building all these ML models for let's say your organization, are they going to become irrelevant? Can we simply rely on services like OpenAI and Vertex and other services that are coming up? And to me, the answer is Probably not. I don't think these services can solve every problem you're trying to solve for yourself. And the reason for that is the data set that these services are based on is basically public data. Is the data that's available out there for everybody, and there is a lot of intelligence that you can build based on that. But then what the lag is the data that's sitting in your enterprise. So they don't have your enterprise context. They don't have data related. Take an example. If you're a hospital and you have access to a lot of medical records of patients, and you want to build some intelligence, some ML models, to help predict certain types of treatments or diagnosis and things like that. Chat GPT in itself, based on public data, cannot solve that problem for you. So what I see happening in future is that with the help of private instance of some of these services, combining with the large data sets that you have, you might want to fine tune these services, uh, customize them, make them better, and then leverage it for your purposes. So it's going to be a combination, is what I'm saying. It's going to be. I expect new tools, new technologies to be using this as a base data set or base ML model, customizing it, fine tuning it for their own vertical, for their own business models, and then using it in a way that their data does not get compromised. So that's the direction I'm looking at. I don't know, Gabe and Mark, if you guys want to add something to that.
I think the way you described that, Sumit, I think is beautiful. And again, automation can become the wrapper to bring it together, right? A combination of consuming internal models, enterprise models, external models, and then combined with whatever else you have within your enterprise walls, right? You might want to combine that with some information that's just native in your business systems and package that together. So automation can be can basically combine those sources together to deliver the end solution.
And I think too, what that question reminds me of is sort of where we started at the top, which was sort of that human in the loop side. In this case, you're talking about building these custom solutions and APIs, whatever the solution might be. But what if you could get 80% of the way there, free your teams to do other things, whatever that might be. Thinking about the next, solution potentially, but using the power of generative AI in this case, and automation to get you to that 80%, so that the 20 is focused on the maybe higher value application or whatever that might be. So maybe that's what it is, right? It's not a complete cut and paste. Again, we're not going complete autonomy and just saying, hey, go do this, go build me this thing. But it can get you further faster.
Right.
Right.
Excellent question. Thank you. It looks like we've still got some folks there. So let's keep this conversation going. Manoj, are you there? Hi, Manoj. I think you might be.
Hello.
There you are.
Yeah, can you able to hear me?
Hi.
Yeah, hello.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Yeah. So my question is more about on the customer service industries, right? So in last couple of years, we deploy advanced chatbots, try to divert the calls to the chat platform or the self-service portal, right? So one thing that we are still struggling, that is the CSAT, right? Human touch. So even generative AI or the chat GPT or the chatbots that we're creating, right? So we are still lagging on that sentiment of the customers while providing the resolutions through these channels, right? So what's your thoughts that in upcoming years, right, considering all this new concept, advanced generative AI and chat GPT, how that can be get fulfill, or how what's your opinion that how that can be change the customer CSAT view?
So great question, Manoj, and it's interesting because we are within my own organization. Actually, we are right in the middle of um, you know combining the power of Chat GPT with the chatbot work that was already going on. We're trying to make our chatbot more intelligent with the help of Chat GPT. So let's quickly talk about that. First of all, I feel that customer service is an area which is very ripe for transformation with the help of generative AI. No doubt about that. Why do I feel like that? If you look at the traditional way of supporting customers, whether it's your internal employees or your customers, it's still very traditional method where someone creates a ticket. The tickets gets assigned to somebody who probably knows about how to solve for that problem, and then that person responds in a way that hopefully the customers likes. If you just look at these three steps in customer support process, there is an area, there is a possibility of humans either making a mistake or responding in a way that doesn't really meet the customer's needs. So first step is finding out the real intent of the question, assigning it to the right person. That's where mistakes happen, delays happen. So I expect generative AI. I think generative AI can play a really good role reviewing the ticket content and understanding the intent of the question and assigning it to the right person in no time, because it's really good at doing that. So right there, you save a lot of time. And then generative AI can also be used to come up with a response based on the existing knowledge base that it can also read, if it's already available. It can propose a response before it goes out. At that stage again, you're saving some time. And at the third step, let's say the agent is ready to respond to a question, you can use generative AI to review his response or her response and see whether it's actually answering the question or not. At all three stages, generative AI can play a really significant role. It can save time, it can review your response, it can tell you whether you're actually solving the problem or not, and it can ensure that the customer in the end is getting the response that it deserves in the time that it deserves. So your CSAT servers are directly linked with timeliness, accuracy, and completeness of the response. And I think generative AI can help on all three of them. So I'm very bullish about the use of generative AI on customer support just because of these reasons.
And again, not to say at all that the human in the loop doesn't make sense at some point. If from a standpoint of having the human touch, a human can still be involved in those scenarios, Sumit, to review the final proposed response and make sure it's hitting the mark, and sign off on the response if the human touch needs to be there, because I think that can still be meaningful.
Absolutely, and at no stage, I mean, you leave it all to generative AI. I
Right.
think you got to all three steps that I described. I think they all need to be kind of synthesized together with the help and automation technology, where you also put a human in the loop.
Right.
You don't want generative AI to respond to a customer without somebody actually reviewing it, right? So all of these pieces need to come together with the help of some sort of a automation workflow.
Yes.
But at each step, you can save time by using generative AI.
Agreed.
I think it's funny. That's probably one of the biggest use cases, or sort of functions, if you will, from a customer service perspective, that I've seen. And we have a bunch of developers that have been posting and sharing, and we've been resharing specifically around that customer service side and doing sentiment analysis, generating responses. I think it's really interesting when I think about, like, for instance, we have embedded automation, right? So we can put automation copilot, say, in Genesis, or in Salesforce, or in, so you have this interface embedded. You don't have to go to the separate instance, right? And you can call the automations to do the thing. Send it to like we do with the video, for instance. Send the sort of the command, have it do the action, bring back the results, and then the human can say, okay, this is the right answer. But again, it's expediting the thing. And I think fundamentally the point is kind of what you mentioned, Sumit, is yes, AHT and accuracy and all these things are show up sort of in the reporting, right? But ultimately, what are we trying to do? We're trying to keep the customer happy. We're trying to solve their problem, and that's the consideration, I think, when you're doing these things and building technology, that it's always about that human. It's all about that customer and that outcome.
That's beautifully said, Gabe, because I think that's the answer to a lot of kind of the questions that can plague us about the are we losing the human touch? Humans are still in the driver's seat. The technology is helping the human, not the other way around, right? I think that's a good way to view it. if I can give a better outcome to my customer using technology, then I, as a human, am showing empathy to them. I want their problem to be solved properly. I'm still in the driver's seat, but I'm using this technology and leveraging it to give them the best possible outcome. That is empathy, if you ask me.
Yeah, that's a great point. So we had talked about some of the different use cases, and I think, we kind of touched on all of them actually, because there was 3 that I wanted to highlight from your blog. One of which was around customer support, which we just spoke to. And it's funny because when I think about customer support, most often we think it's sort of externally facing, but within your organization, Sumit and Mark, myself and others within the organization are your customers, right? So how are you able to leverage the technology? I know we're all already using automation, and now we're able to use truly intelligent automation to solve and make our lives easier as employees of the company. We touched on the idea of getting good data to be able to make good decisions, right? And then I think we led off even with this legal use case that you had mentioned in the blog as well. So and we've talked about other use cases as well with the questions coming up. So thank you all for those insightful questions and thought-provoking questions. I wanted to ask, so we talked about in your blog, Sumit, you talked about the use cases, for instance, but you also have some key considerations that you recommend, and I want to touch a little bit on that. You touched on a little bit here and there, but in summary, Sumit, are there a highlight list of sort of the big 3 things at a high level that as the CIO, a leader in the IT department, you should be considering as we look at this technology?
Yeah, so Gabe, I know we touched upon some of them, but if I have to summarize, the considerations that every CIO IT leader should keep into account, I would say, first and foremost, have some sort of policies and guidelines for your employees about how to use these technologies. They're so easy to use. They're available in our browser, and you'll be surprised if you talk to your legal team that some of your existing policies might not be able to protect you against some of the risks that you're dealing with. The paradigm has shifted. So I would definitely recommend having a conversation with your legal team and revise your IT policies, make sure employees understand them. That's one I would recommend. Second, we talked about sensitive data, data privacy, things like that. There are ways. We talked about how you can actually leverage private instance, enterprise controls, automation in certain cases, data masking, things like that. So pay attention to keeping your data secure. Do not rely on these services to keep your data secure. And last but not the least, like we were saying, get the grunt work done by generative AI, but put a human in the loop. Do not rely on these services to be 100% accurate. Be very, very wary about that, very careful about that. We all want to automate as much as possible, but keeping a human in the loop, especially for critical tasks, is definitely a very, very important consideration.
That's great. Those are great tips, pro tips from the man himself. And again, I encourage you all to read the blog. I think it's in the chat there, the link to it. Mark, anything to add there?
No, I think that's a great summary. I think just from kind of a solutioning or development standpoint, a couple of things I would add, and that's just in terms of key considerations. One is this whole area of prompt engineering. The success in terms of the ability to use generative AI really rises or falls based on our ability to prompt engineer well. So I think that one's really, really important. And I think also making sure that the human in the loop, we talked about that. And the other bit would be making sure that as we build automations using generative AI, making sure that we keep maintenance as a key kind of principle, ease of maintenance. So all this stuff around prompt engineering, when we're designing and delivering these automations, we make sure that the prompt engineering piece of it is very configurable without changing code. It sounds like a minor point, but this world this stuff is evolving so rapidly. Really, really important that we can configure the prompt engineering piece as needed as the technology evolves. So just a couple thoughts for those of us that are delivering automation using generative AI.
Yeah, thanks for the insight there. Guys, it's been an amazing session. We're almost at time. I really want to thank you for sharing the practical insights, the vision. This has been, and I want to thank the audience as well for participating. Some really great questions. This has been one of our best events so far. So thank you to everybody. Next week we'll be looking at generative AI for finance in the function. With Ken Mertzel from Automation Anywhere. We have a special guest there as well, so hopefully you'll join us. I think these conversations are extremely insightful and helpful. I encourage all of our guests and listeners today to connect with Sumit and Mark on LinkedIn and elsewhere. You can always hit our corporate page to ask your questions as well. You can add your comments and questions into the chat here on the event, and we'll get to answering those as well. Also, just a quick little advertisement. Bot Game Season 4 for you developers out there and you citizen developers and even hacks like me is coming around the corner. And of course, as you might expect, the challenges will have an AI angle to them. So really excited about Bot Game Season 4 coming up the first week of May. We also have our Pathfinder Community Space Camp, which is a great environment for everyone to join and collaborate with peers and fellow practitioners, thought leaders, et cetera, from our robust and expert set of customers and partners. So I encourage everyone to check out those links as well and get involved. Share your ideas and share your builds. If you're out there building solutions, share those. We'll pick them up. Tag Automation Anywhere, and we'll amplify those solutions. And we're excited to see what you guys do. Gentlemen, I want to really thank you for the time. I know everyone's super busy building the next generation of generative AI and automation solutions to make the world a better place. So Sumit, thank you so much for the time today. Really appreciate having you.
Great conversation, Gabe, and thank you for inviting. Always fun to be with you. Thank you.
And Mark, as always, my friend, good to have you. Thanks for your insights as well. I know you've got your team out there building some great solutions for myself and for others within the company, and I truly appreciate it. It's really amazing stuff.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Gabe.
All right, guys, let's do it again. And again, we'll see you next week when I have the opportunity to speak with Ken Mertzel, and we talk finance and Gen AI. So join us then. Thank you all again. We will talk to you soon. Go be great.